I get it. You've probably spent a few minutes scrolling through endless subwoofer listings, trying to picture how each one would fit into your rig, and you're nervous about dropping a lot of cash on something that ends up collecting dust. You don't want a giant box that sounds great on paper but ends up being a headache to power, mount, or even move. You want to know if this 21-inch EMINENCE NSW602124 actually delivers the low-end punch you need without turning your setup into a maintenance nightmare. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about what this subwoofer is trying to be. EMINENCE has built a 21-inch driver with a Bifilar, low-inductance voice coil and gave you the option to select 1, 2, or 4 ohm wiring. On the spec sheet you'll see a hefty 500W RMS rating and a 5000W peak claim. That tells you the unit is aimed squarely at professional-grade applications where you have a beefy amplifier, a dedicated enclosure, and a venue that actually needs that kind of low-frequency thrust. It's not a plug-and-play home theater speaker you can just drop on a bookshelf. If you're running a live sound PA for clubs, outdoor festivals, or a touring band, the selectable impedance can be a real convenience. Being able to wire the sub for 2 ohms lets you pull more current from a high-power amp, which translates into tighter, more controlled bass when you're driving a massive PA system. The low-inductance coil is also designed to respond quickly to fast transients, so you get that punchy feel on kick drums that can sometimes get lost in larger, slower-moving cones. Now, here's where the practical side starts to show some hidden trade-offs. A 21-inch driver is massive. Think a 70-pound basket before you even add the enclosure. That means you need a sturdy, custom-built box that can handle the internal pressure, especially since this model is sealed. A sealed enclosure gives you tighter control and cleaner bass, but it also requires a lot more power to achieve the same SPL you'd get from a ported design. In real-world terms, you'll likely need an amp that can reliably deliver close to the 500W RMS rating just to keep the sub sounding solid at the volumes most venues demand. Because the unit is sealed, the low-frequency roll-off is steeper than you'd get with a vented box. If you're looking for that rumble down at 30 Hz, you'll have to accept that the sub will start tapering off around the low 40s, depending on the enclosure volume you choose. That's fine for a rock or metal gig where you want a tight, punchy thump, but it could feel a bit thin for EDM or hip-hop events that rely on deep sub-bass that you can feel in your chest. Another practical point is the power handling versus efficiency. This driver is built to survive huge power, but it isn't particularly efficient. In other words, you'll need to feed it a lot of wattage to get decent SPL, which can lead to higher heat buildup. The Bifilar coil does help with heat dissipation, but you still need an amp with good headroom and thermal protection. If you pair it with an underpowered amp, you'll hear distortion quickly, and you might even damage the voice coil. That's a common pitfall for people who see the 5000W peak number and assume they can get away with a modest 500W amp. So, who should actually consider buying this sub? The answer is fairly narrow. If you're a professional installer who already has a high-power amplifier and you're comfortable designing or buying a sealed enclosure that can accommodate the size and weight, this can be a solid component in a larger system. It's especially appealing for venues that need a lot of low-end in a compact footprint. Think a club where floor space is at a premium but you still need the impact for the bass guitar and kick drum. It also makes sense for a touring rig where you want a single driver that can be swapped between 1, 2, or 4 ohm configurations depending on the amp you're using. On the flip side, if you're a home theater enthusiast, a small venue bar owner, or a DIY hobbyist who wants a sub that can sit under a couch, you'll likely be better off looking at a smaller, more efficient driver. The sheer size and power demand of the NSW602124 means you'll spend more on an amp, a custom box, and possibly additional reinforcement to keep the unit stable. You also have to consider the logistics of moving a 70-pound sub around for gigs. Most people end up needing a dolly and extra hands just to get it on stage. One more nuance that often gets overlooked, the bifilar aspect of the voice coil. In theory, running 2 wires in parallel reduces inductance and improves the motor control, which can make the sub respond more accurately to rapid changes in the signal. In practice, that benefit shows up most clearly when you have a high-quality, low-distortion amp that can exploit those fast response times. If you're pairing it with